So the first book that I picked up was actually an arc that I was finishing up before it came out. It's out now, which is Isabel and the Rogue by Liana de la Rosa. This is the second book in the Lunar Sisters. I'm just gonna try that whole thing again because I messed up every single part of that. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with some recent reads. So, as you guys know, I was gone for a couple of months, and while I didn't read a ton, I say that now and I've already looked at my numbers and they're much higher than I thought they were. I didn't read a lot per month, but combined it's about what I would normally have in a wrap-up. So, I thought I'd combine them into one video and kind of catch you up on some of the books that I have picked up over the course of the last couple of months. There is a theme. There is a lot of romance and a lot of thriller. Those are the two genres that I read a bunch from. But let's dive into the stats. So over the course of 2 months, I read 10 books, which was about 85 hours listened, which was about 3,442 pages, over 3 audiobooks, 1 ebook, 1 physical book, and 5 mixed. Age category was actually, I had way more YA than I thought. We had 3 YA and 7 adult books. So I read way more YA than I anticipated reading. Genres, like I said, we had a lot of romance and thriller. We had 4 romance, 4 thriller, and then 2 fantasy. And then ratings, we had not as many higher ratings, but I am a 4-star queen. So we did have 5 4 stars, 4 3 stars, and 1 DNF. So starting in order, let's see if I remember what these books were about. So the first book that I picked up was actually an e-arc that I think I started in May. It took me a long time to get to it, but I finished it up in June. And that is Isabel and the Rogue by Liana de la Rosa, which is the second book in the Luna Sisters series. I read the first one, Anna Maria and the Fox, and really, really enjoyed that. And so I was able to get an arc on NetGalley. And so I have a full review. I mean, I have a review for everything on Goodreads, but this one's a little bit deeper in depth. Trigger warnings, this one for PTSD, but in this one we follow the second sister, Isabel, and the love interest in this book is Sirius. Now, we did meet him in the first book, and I will say, unlike other companion series, you really, really need to read the first one for this one to make sense, because this series is really good at having, yes, a fun romance, historical romance plot, but there's way more substance to it. We follow the Luna sisters are basically political, I don't even know what you call it, but their father was in charge of Mexico, and so they have kind of come over to London to escape, be safe, and then also to maybe help the people of London think a little bit differently about people from Mexico. And so it's been 2 years since the first book, and like I said, there's a lot of political twist to this. In this one, we have a lot of spying and espionage, if you will, because Isabel has basically been tasked by people in the government of Mexico, because she is the sister that's kind of quiet, reads, hides to herself. The older sister, Anna Maria, is a little bit more perfect, if you will, exactly what people would want, and then her younger sister is just the fun-go-lucky kind of one. So she is more reserved, and because of that, she's able to kind of sneak around, and so she uses this ability to kind of see if she can find any sort of information at some of the house parties that she's invited to, because she obviously is invited to some of the higher-ups in the English society. And so she goes through their correspondence, tries to see if there's any hidden information that she can find to send back to Mexico. So you have her, and then you've got Sirius, who is basically, they're on the same team, but he is part of a secret service of sorts in London. So he's kind of doing the same thing where he uses his ways. He's a little more Playboy-esque, and he uses this to find his way into some parties and therefore searches for information. So you have the two of them who don't know what the other one is up to at first, and then of course figures it out along the way. They end up kind of helping each other, and it's their romance of sorts. Isabel doesn't really have any interest in being with him. She has always wanted to go back to Mexico. She just London's fine, but it's not her home, and so she really misses her home, and so her whole plan is to go back. So obviously she can't have any kind of connection with anybody, but lo and behold, things happen. So I remember really enjoying this series. Like I said, there's a lot of political twists, but it's not too heavy-handed in the sense of like, it still has a lot of action. There's a lot of, you know, them sticking around and possibly getting in trouble and things like that. And then of course, romance is a big part of this. Romance is the main genre of this. So like the espionage and the spying is a little bit on this back burner, if you will. But the two of them are just so much fun to read about. And you really get to see them get over a lot of stuff because both of them have to get through a lot in their own personal lives. A lot of hurdles for themselves to even come together as anything. So I loved it. It was a fun romance. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed the first one. I'm so glad I read this one, and I'm very curious to see what the third one's going to be about because obviously we follow the third sister. I believe her name is Gabrielle, and we have been introduced to the guy that she is going to end up with in her romance, but I don't remember who he is. But I do remember we met him in the first one because the 3 main guys in this series are like really close. So you've got that. But I just like seeing Sirius kind of come out of his shell a little bit in this book. It was fun. I loved it. It had all the fun, fuzzy feelings you expect from like a historical romance book, but it has a lot more substance plot-wise to it. So the next book that I ended up picking up was the 6th volume of The Ancient Magus Bride. And this one I ended up giving 3 stars to. Trigger warnings for drug abuse in this one. This was a weird volume for me because it got really lost. I ended it and I'm not entirely sure what I read. So I've talked about the series a lot. Obviously I'm on the 6th volume of this. So in this series we have our main character who is really powerful, kind of human, if you will. She's a little bit of a conduit for magic. And so in the first book she gets bought basically by this mage who is teaching her to be his apprentice, an assistant, and how to do magic. And basically he buys her to protect her. So she's completely free, but he's offering to teach her. So in this series, we get a lot of world building, and that is my favorite part. I'm discovering the more I read volumes in the series, the world building and the magic system are fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed that part, but the character is a little bit lackluster, and I think there's going to be a romance just based on obviously the title of this, but I don't actually know the ages of these characters. I think our main female is older than I want her to be, or that I think she is, but she's giving off like middle grade young girl vibes. And the mage is this like 1,000-year-old being, and he's giving off like fatherly, grandfatherly, I'm taking care of you vibes. So I don't know. It's really bizarre because they like kind of have hinted a little bit, like there's not a romance between them, but they've hinted at the possibility of there being one in the future. And because of how I envision them age-wise, it makes me uncomfy. But like I said, we haven't gotten to anything like that yet, so I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm still going to keep reading these volumes until something really outlandish happens, because nothing has happened yet, like I said. But there's just something about their relationship that I'm afraid of where it's going to go. But so far it's been good. In this one we really have our mage is kind of learning about human emotions, and he's starting to feel some things, and so he's learning about that. And then we have our main female lead, the young, well, I don't know if she's a young girl, but the young girl basically teaching him what these emotions mean and giving them names, and so he's able to kind of work through them. So you have that. You've got some chapters or issues in this volume that pertain to like specific things, and there's a couple of mystery elements, so that's been interesting. But literally I finished this and I was like, I'm not even sure what I read. So not my favorite in the series, but I'm definitely invested now, and there has to be something that's really ridiculous for me to stop reading them. I think there's like 20 something, so I'll have to get the next one out from the library whenever I get the time. But I've made it to the 6th one and I did enjoy it. Next one I picked up was one that is so outside of my comfort zone, and that is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is my very first Ruth Ware book I've ever read. It's definitely way more thriller than mystery. It's for a book club that I'm part of, and so it was the first time that I took part of this book club, so that was really fun. Trigger warnings in this one for child death and mentions of self-harm. This has been out there for a while, so I'm sure a lot of people know what this is about, but we follow our main character, who is she's not a nanny, but she basically is hired as a nanny, like a live-in nanny for this couple's 3 kids. There's 2 younger ones. I think one's like middle school age, one's real young, and there's a baby. And so it's the 3 of them. Also, I lied, there's also a 4th one who is like teenager, but she's at school and only comes home on breaks, I believe. I don't think she comes home every weekend, but she's like rebellious teenager kind of vibes. So you've got those 4 kids, but she's really only in charge of 3. So she gets hired, and she comes to this house, and it's like in a super remote part of, I believe, Scotland, but it's super remote, and it is super high tech. And so the couple is like, they own their own company together, and they like are architects, I think. They like renovate houses and stuff. So the house is this super smart house, and it's super creepy. So she gets hired, and then this couple eventually like almost immediately has to go off on a fair, and so she is in charge of this house with these kids. And there is like a handyman that lives in like a house, like a barn house right off the house. So he's like not there, but he does like all of the other stuff, and it's really well paid. It's all this stuff. And so you start the book knowing that there is a death. One of the kids dies, but you don't know which one. And it's presented as our main character is in jail and has been arrested for this. And she's like, I didn't do it, but no one believes me. And so she's writing to this lawyer to basically be like, please represent me. I know everyone thinks all of the stuff, and based on the testimony and like the interview I gave the cops, it doesn't look good. Here's what happened. I don't pretend to be perfect, but let me tell you everything that happened leading up to this so that you know the whole truth, and you know that I didn't do this. And so it's basically presented as this one big letter to this lawyer. And so what I loved about this is it was honestly like it was creepy. This tech that keeps going haywire, like all of a sudden music will start really loud, or lights will turn on and off, and she can't make it work. And so it's a little creepy because of that. And so it's very like, it's written in a way that's very suspenseful. You're very on edge the whole time. You know something bad's going to happen, but you can't figure out what's going on. And at the same time, not a lot happens until like the last 20 to 30 pages of the book. You kind of have this big buildup. And so it was going to be a 3-star for me, even though it was kind of creepy and super put me on edge until the end, because there was like 3 or 4 twists at the end that I didn't see coming, and you don't realize who did it until quite literally the last page. So it kind of kept me in shock, and I ended up giving it 4 stars because I really enjoyed the way it was crafted, because it gave me this false sense of security. Is not the right word, but like monotonousness to the story, because it's building up and building up, and you keep thinking that you're going to get to like a moment, and then nothing happens, and nothing happens, and everything's okay, and everyone's alive, and you're like, okay, when are we going to get to like the murder part of this book? Because that's what this thing is all leading up to, is like what happened. The author gives you this like false sense of like nothing's going on until the very end, when she throws all these curveballs at you, and I didn't see any of them coming. I think I guessed one literally the sentence before it was revealed, because I was like, there's no way this is right. And then that's like the last big thing. So that was crazy to me, but I still like really enjoyed it. Like, I'm not a big thriller person, so as far as like thrillers go, I don't know if it's the most well-written one, but I enjoyed my time reading it. It was crazy. I didn't expect a lot of stuff. I still think pretty highly of this book. I will think about it. It's probably going to be one of my more favorite thrillers at the moment. It's not my favorite. There's definitely some others that are winning, but I'm glad I read it, because I would have never picked it up without this book club. Nothing about the story sounded interesting to me. It sounded a little too thriller for my taste, but it wasn't too bad, and I did read it during the daytime and not at night, because I made that mistake early on of trying to listen to it at night, and it was just not a good decision. So the ending made all the difference, and I liked how it was written, so I'm definitely going to give other Ruth Ware books a try. I actually have one on my list and on my shelves now that I want to give a try. So she's an author that I had kind of written off, because nothing about her books really interested me. They were all a little too much for me, but because of how this one went, I'm definitely going to give some of her other things a try if they interest me. So I'm excited to dive into some more of her books. Next, I ended up picking up Disciples of Chaos, which is the second book in the Seven Faceless Saints duology by M.K. Lobb. I read the first one a couple of months ago, and I immediately put a hold on the audiobook for the second one, and it finally came in. So I decided to listen to it. I gave it 4 stars. I definitely enjoyed the first one more. The first one had a air of like murder mystery. We're figuring stuff out, whereas this one was more about kind of toppling a corrupt government, which was totally fine in itself. But I think the things that I liked about the first book, plot-wise, weren't necessarily here. But if I had maybe had it right after the first one and been able to binge them back to back, there's a good chance I might have enjoyed this one a little bit more. I think having a little bit of time between the two didn't work in my favor, but I liked diving back sooner because, like I said, it's only been a couple of months since I read the first book, so I still had all the characters in my head. I didn't remember a lot, but then when I started reading, everything started coming back to me. There was a lot of stuff in here that it's very much like they're on the run kind of vibes. So we didn't have, like I said, plot-wise, there's a few things that I really liked about the first one that wasn't here. But I still give it 4 stars. I still really liked it. The ending was great. I kept reading it and liking it. So it was fine. It felt like a lot of other dystopian fantasies. The magical system was pretty well established in the first book, so we didn't get a lot of world building or anything like that in this one. There was some, because you had to build a couple of things up, but overall, a lot of world building was already done. We were just kind of like expanding it because the main characters didn't know. The first book, the audience and the readers didn't know the world. The second book, we were learning stuff because the characters didn't know stuff. So I liked it. I feel like I don't have a lot to say about it. It's still got 4 stars, and it's been a while since I read it, so it's clearly very forgettable, which is probably why I didn't get a full 5. I'm wondering if, looking back, I might maybe bump it down to a 3 at this point, but I liked it. I liked the characters. It was fun to see them again, and it was a fun story. It didn't feel unique, but I still enjoyed my time reading it. So if you like the formula of like a dystopian YA fantasy, you'll like this series, I think. The next book is actually the first one I physically own and can show you, and that is A Lady for the Duke by Alexis Hall, which I love this author so much. I gave this one 4 stars. Trigger warnings for transphobia, ableist language, mentions of suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and PTSD. There's quite a lot in this. We follow our main 2 characters, Viola and Gracewood, and Viola is trans, and the book starts with her and like a family friend that she like now lives with, and she and Gracewood, when they were younger, were like really close, but they both went to war, and she was presumed dead on the battlefield. So she used this to her advantage to kind of reinvent herself. So everyone now thinks that the person that she once was died in battle, and she has reinvented herself as a lady. And so it's all about really her and Gracewood. She has kind of kept her distance because she feels guilty about basically making Gracewood think that she has died. But she's forced in this situation where she goes to his home, and there's something about her, and he like kind of realizes that she is very open about stuff, and so like he is dealing with a lot. There's a lot of trauma in his past because he feels like his friend has died, and he's kind of been grieving his friend for a very long time. This book is really good if you are someone who likes a lot of dialogue. There is a plot, but it's not the main point of the story. The main point is there are so many deep conversations between Viola and Gracewood in the beginning, and then later on, once he figures out kind of who she is, there's a lot of deep conversations. So like it is heavy in the dialogue. I will say kind of go in with a little bit of a sense of disbelief, or like disbanding your belief a little bit, because there are some situations in here that I think when people find out about Viola or react to her, I think is not as believable historically. I think people would have had a really bad reaction to her as a person if this was an actually historical person and they found out. I don't know for sure, obviously, but my assumption is historically people are not as forgiving. So there's definitely some situations in here that I'm like, okay, I'm not so sure I believe that was accepted as quickly as it was, but I still really enjoyed it. It was romance between the 2 of them, so they had a lot of really fun romantic elements. I will say this is definitely someone, there is some smut in this book, but if you are not a huge fan of smut, but you don't mind some, then this is a good book for you. It's not super descriptive, if I can remember correctly. I really only have one scene that I can think of that is smutty. The rest, like I said, is primarily just the two of them having these deep conversations about life and stuff. So it's a character study of these two people, which I thought was really fascinating as they kind of come together. I can't obviously comment on any of the rep or anything like that, but just know that there is rep in here, and I enjoyed seeing that in a historical setting. I'm so glad it exists. I love this author, so I want to dive into their entire backlog. So this is just the next one that I picked up, and I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was good. The next one I picked up is also within that thriller mystery realm, and that is Dark Corners by Megan Golding. This one is actually the second in the series, and I think it's just because of who we follow. We follow Rachel Kroll, who's a true crime podcaster. So this book follows our main character, Rachel, obviously, and she has been asked by the FBI to help them out because there's a guy who is in jail and is suspected of a lot of, I think, 6 different murders, but he's about to be released because I don't think they have as much on him as I think that he did, and he was visited by an influencer, and then she went missing. So they think something else kind of went down, and they ask Rachel to help out. So she goes down and helps out, and it's her diving into this story of whether or not this Terrence guy, who's the one in jail, actually did the things that he's been accused of, and then also what happened to this girl, because she has been missing for like so many hours, and they are afraid that it's connected to him. So trigger warnings for obviously murder, drug abuse, and domestic abuse in this book. This story was fine. I gave it 3.5 stars. I think as a thriller, I mean, as a mystery, it's good. As a thriller, it's a little bit mediocre. I felt like this was, like you watch those murder mystery cop kind of television shows. This felt like an episode of that where everything got wrapped up really quickly. It's not the longest. It's actually relatively short when you think about it. So I thought it was fine. Like, there wasn't anything bad about it. And once I got all the information at the end, I could see what the author was doing. So I liked it as far as it being a good thriller. It was just kind of okay. I liked seeing them piece all the pieces together, and that was interesting. But I've definitely read better. I'm kind of in this zone of like reading mysteries that have a podcast element to it, because I've definitely read, I can't remember which one it was, but I read one recently that I really liked, and this one just kind of fell flat. I mean, I read it, I enjoyed it, it was fine, is kind of how I feel about it. Nothing against this author. I definitely will try things by this author again. This one specifically didn't work, but I still liked piecing the story together. That was interesting, and piecing the mystery together, that was fun for me to read. The next book is the first one that I finished in July, and this one is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. Trigger warnings for drug abuse in this one. This book I gave 3 stars to. The plot of the story is super intriguing. This book follows 3 siblings after their mother has passed away, and they're going through the house, and they find some old VHS tapes, and they put one in, and on the tape, it shows their dad covered in blood, and they discover some stuff about them. And so it's them kind of trying to figure out what's going on, but you've got these 3 siblings who are very different. You mainly follow the middle one. She's the one who's been, I think she's the middle one. I don't remember. The older sister. She is the one that's with the mom up until the very end. She's taking care of the mom. She stayed in town. The brother is the oldest one. And no, he's not. He might be the baby. I don't remember. He basically has escaped this town, if you will, and has lived his life and has made bukus of money. And so he never comes around, but he's come back, obviously, because the mother was really ill, and so they were all trying to get back before she died, and he didn't make it, nor did the sister. And then the other sister, the younger sister, is a drug addict, and she has been going through some stuff. And so it's them trying to figure out, the sister's mainly trying to figure out what happened. What is this tape? What does this mean? So the plot, in theory, fascinating. The execution, I was honestly really bored a lot of the time. You do switch back and forth between those 3 perspectives. Like, we follow the 3 siblings, and the ending and the kind of like whodunit moment, I didn't see coming. And I was shocked. But it felt like such a boring journey to get to that point. It felt like they were building up to this thing, but I don't know how to explain it. Like, the execution was just not good, in my opinion. The story was interesting, and I think the plot could have, there's a lot of stuff that could have been better to make this plot work. Because again, the idea of this was very fascinating to me, but the execution, not so great. I honestly thought about DNFing it because I just was listening to it and it took me forever to get through, but I was very curious to see how it was going to end, and it wasn't a super long book either. So this is just one of the ones that didn't really work. I still gave it 3 stars because, like I said, the ending definitely shocked me, and I didn't expect that, but it was fine. It was fine. The next book is actually one that I DNF'd, and I think I've hard DNF'd this because I've tried to pick this one up twice. I picked this one up once in June, and I picked it up again because the audiobook came back. And I DNF'd halfway through. I just didn't care. And that is Duke Gone Rogue by Christy Carlisle, which is the first book in a Love on Holiday novel. It, in theory, should have worked for me, but I think I just picked it up at the wrong time. I don't think there's anything wrong with this book. I don't think this is a bad romance. I don't think this is written badly. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it just is not one for me, and I picked it up at the wrong time. I've tried it multiple times, and it didn't work multiple times, so I'm just gonna unhaul it and let someone else enjoy it. But we follow our main 2 characters. We have William Hurt, who's a duke, and then you have Madeline Ravenwood, who is in charge of a plant nursery or a plant business that both her parents have passed away, but they owned it, and now she's in charge of it. And it takes place in this coastal town, and the Duke owns this property. His father was a rake, and he had basically run their family into the ground. And this estate specifically, his father would go to and have like these ridiculous parties with gambling and women and all sorts of vices you can imagine. And he did not think highly about that, so he has never gone back to this estate. But his sister is basically like, you need to loosen up, my dude. So go take a holiday. And so he does. And so he takes a holiday in this town. And this woman is part of a committee who is trying to, as part of, I don't remember what the committee is called. Oh, it's literally called the Royal Visit Committee, because the princess is coming to visit their town and they want it to look beautiful, and his estate looks awful. So she is on a mission to convince him to refurbish at least the outside of the estate to make it look good for when the princess comes. Nothing is wrong with this. It wasn't for me. That's the best way I can describe it. It just didn't work for me. It should have. A bunch of things were in place for it to work. It just didn't. So yeah, I'm gonna DNF this one, and I'm going to unhaul it, and I'm not going to continue with that series. I'll definitely try other things by that author. I have nothing against that author specifically. It's just that it just didn't work. It just didn't work. The book I picked up was a YA thriller that actually came out this year, and one that I had like all my anticipated releases, and that is Have You Seen This Girl by Nita Tyndall. This one I ended up giving 3 stars to. Lots of trigger warnings. We have obviously murder, mentions of suicide, transphobia, specifically dead naming, and misgendering. So this book starts or follows our main character Sid, who is non-binary and has grown up in a very small town. So not a lot of people respect that about them. But they're also a little bit of a pariah because their father is in jail for murdering a bunch of girls. So a lot of people don't think highly of Sid because they're the kid of this guy, and so all of a sudden girls start appearing again, and are found in the same way and the same location as the girls this person's father killed. And so Sid is trying to figure out what's going on. So they are investigating on their own to try to figure out basically if their father has been somehow murdering these girls in jail, if there's a copycat. Some people think it's Sid because it's this guy's child, all this kind of stuff. There's a little bit of a romance in this book, which I did enjoy. I gave it 3 stars, like I mentioned, because just kind of like where I mentioned was Where the Bodies Are. The story, the plot, fascinating. But the process to the end, pretty boring. This is a pretty short story. I remember the audiobook being relatively short as well, and I don't know what it was. It just didn't work. I was bored a lot of the time, and there's a lot of good and I don't know if it's because it was YA or if it was just I read a lot of mysteries and so I needed to branch out into something else. I don't know what it was, but like I liked it. I liked the representation in the story. I love this author. So I was very interested to see another story by this author because I've only read one. It was about grief. And so this one was like a murder mystery. But I liked the character of Sid. I thought they were fascinating. I liked seeing them because basically the story starts with a new girl coming to town and coming to their school, and even though they've been warned about Sid, she becomes friends with Sid. And so it's that conversation of Sid feeling like they don't deserve a friend and deserve a relationship and things like that. So the character of Sid was really fascinating to follow. There's a little bit of a fantastical-ish element. There's not, but there is. I don't know how to explain it. It's more magical realism than like actual true fantasy, but it was fascinating. I liked the story. I think I probably missed some stuff. I probably read it or listened to it not at the right time, which is probably why I didn't enjoy it all the way. But I still love this author, and this just wasn't the most amazing one for me by them, and that's okay because I've loved other things by this author, and I'm definitely going to keep giving them a shot. This one was just not one that worked, unfortunately. And the final book that I read was actually a romance. I decided to take a break from the mystery and go for romance, and I think that was a good decision because I ended up picking up Kissing Kosher by Jean Meltzer, which was the most recent book by this author. I really want to say this book came out last year or this year, I think. And then I think she's got a new one coming out, but that one doesn't come out until either later this year or next year. Either way, I love this author. This author writes books a little bit own voices because the author is chronically ill and Jewish herself, and so all of her stories have a Jewish element as well as a chronic illness representation of sorts. The first book that I read by them, which I'm pretty sure is also her first book she ever wrote, was The Matzah Ball, which is a Hanukkah story, and I really enjoyed that one. So this one got 4.5 stars. I loved this story. In this book, we have Avital, or Avi, and Ethan, and they both are, it's a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet story, if you will. Their grandfathers went into business together to work, like a bakery, basically, and something happened, they fell apart. Each family has a different version of the story, but they broke apart and they have been rivals ever since. Avi is a photographer, but she was diagnosed recently with a chronic illness, specifically pelvic pain is the best way to describe it, and it's way more than that, but that is basically her way of basically, this is the easiest way to explain to you what's going on. And so because of that, she has come back home and is running this bakery with her brother. It's not her thing. She's actually really stressed by it, but it's security. She can literally, like when she's having a bad chronic illness day, it's a family business, so they understand. So she's come back to run this bakery. Ethan's grandfather is very manipulative of him and his siblings, and basically sends Ethan in to steal the recipe for their like crowning thing. I can't remember what it's called, but there's this pumpkin pastry that's like what they're known for. And so Ethan comes in and basically pretends not to be part of this family. He doesn't want to do it, but his grandfather forces him, and he gets hired to work in this bakery, hopefully to steal this recipe. The two of them get along quite well, actually. Like, not at first, but eventually they get along well. What I liked about the story, a lot of things. One, the chronic illness representation. I can't speak on how accurate it is or anything like that, but based on what I know about the author and based on the other books by this author, I would assume it comes from a relatively real place. And I love seeing stories that have things like this because every book that this author has written has a different form of chronic illness in it. And so you have a lot of variety, if you will. And this one is a little bit different than her past books because the last two that I've read, the main character suffers from something that they have known about for a long time. So it's not a normal life, but they are normal. They have come to understand how to cope with their chronic illness. This one is at the very beginning stages of figuring out what it is, and so Avi is not coping. It's her trying to figure out how to cope, how to function, how to, like her life is different. The life that she thought she was going to live her entire time And now she has to live differently. And so it's her coming to terms with that and what this new life is going to look like for her. So you got that. And then also Ethan is dealing with a whole lot of stuff from his family. There's a lot of emotional stuff, emotional abuse, specifically from his grandfather. He is an awful grandfather, to be honest. And he's got a younger brother who is basically, he's not, but he is perceived to be a pothead. And then his sister, there was an accident that killed their parents, and they were in it. And ever since this accident, their sister has not, there's something that's not quite right. And so she lives in a home, and he comes to visit her all the time. But the grandfather uses her against him in the sense of like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to cut off ties and you can't see her. So he's dealing with a lot. So what I liked about this, take away the representation and all that kind of stuff, you have these two characters who are super, super flawed and coming from very different, rough situations, and they help each other out. There's a lot of stuff that they have to figure out romantically, and she's always thought that people, once they learn certain things about her, would just like push her to the side and go, okay, I'm done with you. And Ethan is there to be like, what do you need? How can I help you? And it's very different than what she expects. So they're really good at helping each other out. And the kind of climactic moment that I assumed going into the story based on the plot is not what I thought. It actually happens about halfway through, and then there's a lot more going to it. So this is a really good book for watching a very healthy relationship as you have two people figuring stuff out. I couldn't put this down. I literally had this on audio and ebook, and when I couldn't listen to it, I was reading it. Like, there was just, I have my ebook out, or my Kindle out, and I hadn't dived into a Kindle book like that in a very long time. So 4.5 stars feels very appropriate. Honestly, it's almost a 5. It's not quite a 5, but it's almost a 5. And I just adored it. I loved that book. I thought it was really good, and I just really like this author. And that's it. I took a lot of notes, so I did remember some things, but I hope you guys enjoyed a look at my recent reads over the last couple of months. Please let me know, as always, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, or what you read over the summer. I mean, it's technically still summer, but you know, the June and July, that's really summer for me. So what you guys read over the last couple of months, tell me something that's like your favorite, or if you need to rant, you guys know I'm always here to listen to whatever you guys want. But please let me know all your bookish thoughts down below. If you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links. So over check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!